Welcome to the Badass Direct Sales Mastery Podcast with your direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger. Badass Direct Sales Mastery is a podcast for rockstar direct sales moms who are determined to make their business kick ass. Jennie will share her knowledge of effective sales and recruiting techniques, tips to get what you want from your business, and will interview direct sales professionals and leaders from various companies. The interviews will give insight to how these rock stars got to where they are and where they plan to grow in the future. And now, the direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger.
Welcome back to another episode of Badass Direct Sales Mastery. I'm your host, your direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger, helping you whip your business into shape. And today I have with me my friend Hersh Rephun. All right, Hersh Rephun is a holistic brand therapist, and he is the holistic brand therapist of choice for innovators, disruptors, and thought leaders. He has worked with hundreds of corporate and individual clients, from startups to billion-dollar brands, challengers to market leaders, and fledgling filmmakers to Oscar nominees. He delivers impact and influence by honoring one simple principle: sell the truth with humor and humanity. He hosts the popular Yes Brand podcast, and his first book, Selling the Truth, a Semoir with insights for life and business, is available for pre-order. So Hersh and I met, I know you guys are going to be shocked, on one of those cruises. We actually first met on the Podcasters Cruise and have been on Marketers Cruises together, and we have hung out, and I knew in my conversations with him he had to be on the show. So Hersh, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jennie. It is great to be here with you.
Oh my gosh. So I love talking brand, right? Because in a world of network marketing where people who are in this industry are often put into what I think they put themselves into, a locked cubicle brand with the company that they're associated with. And they're not creating a personal brand. And because I know you are in the world of personal branding and disruption, I was like, oh, you're like so perfect for the show. So how did you get into the world of personal branding and doing what you do?
I came up through the usual way, which is stand-up comedy. It's funny because when we talk about destiny and what we're destined to do, it doesn't mean we're not destined to do a certain thing. It just means that we're destined to do a certain thing at a certain time. As a little kid, everybody was like, oh, you're a stand-up comedian. He's going to be a comedian. He's going to be a comedian. And I naturally fit the bill. I was very precocious and audacious and entertaining.
Yeah.
And I learned how to diffuse the tension. I grew up in a happy home, but a lot of personalities, a lot of emotions. And I remember a really bad blowout where I have two older sisters. Just something was going on. I was young. I was like 8 or 9. So I don't know what the thing was.
Right.
But my sisters, who were 3 and 5 years older than I was, they were in the midst of some huge drama. Everybody's yelling. Everybody's screaming at each other. And my sisters cry. There was no way to break the tension other than to like say something. And I came into the room, and dressed as my second grade teacher, Mrs. Nestler. I had stolen my grandmother's wig, and my grandmother was there too. I stole my grandmother's wig, and I put on her house dress, and I put my mother's heels on or something. And I walked in and I said, "What's the problem here?" And then everybody turns around and they couldn't help but crack up. Like, what are they going to do? Be still upset? Looking at an 8-year-old, it's like looking at E.T. when he like dressed up in all of Elliot's clothes or whatever. It was a hysterical thing. So, I had that gift of lowering the temperature, but I also have a knack or a interest in championing other people. So even when I was doing stand-up, I was coaching other comics. If I was, a writer, I was helping people in the writing class. I went to School of Visual Arts and studied film and advertising. And I just felt this nurturing thing which for a while manifested itself in PR. I was like the OG publicist in the world of commercial production and post, because I was in New York, I was in Madison Avenue, but typically of me, instead of just being a copywriter or something like that, I ended up becoming friends with a lot of directors, a lot of composers, editors, visual effects artists, all of whom needed help with PR, with their image, which then it was personal branding, but I didn't think of it that way. But how
Yeah.
do you make filmmakers stand out when there's 7,000 members of the Directors Guild that are just doing commercials alone? And so how do they compete, for that? So
Wow.
I would help them, excel and become visible. And I was doing PR for people like Jason Reitman, who went on to have an amazing film career. And
Yeah.
and this was around the time he was doing Juno, his first film. Theodore Melfi, who did Hidden Figures and St. Vincent, which are great movies,
Yeah.
but was trying to stand out in the field of, of commercial filmmaking. And I think that was more of a draw to me than being on the stage, even because being on
Yeah.
the stage, I think, was fun. And we were talking about speaking, public
Yeah.
speaking is, I love to do public speaking, obviously, but I feel it's much more fun when I'm engaged with people about their brand or
Mm.
so I'd rather talk to a room full of people who are eager to learn how to make themselves more visible than to just be entertaining and just
Yeah.
be fun,
Right.
which is good, but at 8 years old, it was good. I don't wear the dress and the heels anymore.
That's so great. No, and I find that to be very true for a lot of entrepreneurs in that what their driving force is the helping of others, right?
Yeah.
They really just want to help others in some way, shape, or form. And so, in the industry of network marketing, they've found a product or a service that they are passionate about because it solved a problem for them and now they want to
Right.
share it with other people, right? They just want to help other people. So, in a world like that, where you've got people who are associated with a very specific corporate brand, right? A company brand,
Yeah.
how is it that people like that can begin to stand out? What are the things that they need to know about, you know, being quote unquote married to or dating
Right.
a brand that they've got compliance issues, but then they also need to be able to stand out?
Well, the first thing I think that they need to do is take a look at who they were pre-brand. Take a look at who they were
Mm.
before they joined that company. I have a friend who's been with a major, footwear brand for a long time, no more than a decade now, and they've, experienced he was a client beforehand, not at this company. I don't work with brands. I used to work with brands that were big brands. Now I work with people with individual brands. So the thing is, so it's one of those things where you would say, "Oh, I knew him when," but
Yeah.
that personal brand is all about who you were before that. What were your leanings philanthropically? Like, what do you want to do after you leave that place? Do you want to, you know, teach? Do you want to support baseball teams in underdeveloped, like what do you want to do?
Right.
So the things that are not part of that job are still part of you. What kind of books did you like to read? What instrument do you play? All those things that a lot of people think are not relevant simply because on a corporate level, they aren't relevant. But on a personal level, they are. And the hardest thing to hear anyone say is, I do blank, but what I really want to do is this. And their job at their W-2, may be something they're extremely proud of, but they have to start building those blocks that are going to take them to their legacy. And your legacy shouldn't be one word or one company or even
Yeah.
one field of expertise. I don't think
Mm.
anyone wants that. I don't think anyone, even their own company. That's another point, Jenny, which is that I have a lot of clients that just want to separate from their own company, not
Yeah.
because they want to leave it behind, but they want to pass it on. They want to transfer it to another generation. They want to, exit it. But
Right.
they have to build that foundation of who they really are now, so that, and I often work with corporations and with compliance, and I get that from my, commercial production background, because as a publicist, I had to get clearances from, from Netflix or from Disney or, Viacom. And I would
Yeah.
get on the phone with their, because to get the permission to promote the people who created the work was often a negotiation, so that you don't want to mess things up with their client, but you want their client to love what you did. And so that was always the goal, you know. And I worked with photographers who shot billboards, for Fox and all that stuff. And one of the best calls I got was from the head of PR of Fox saying, "We love what you did promoting the photographer, because you followed the guidelines, and we got press in places we never would have gotten it." And so it's a little bit of diplomacy, but you also have to really think about where your heart is
Yeah.
and where you want your legacy to go.
I love that. I think I love the point of starting with who you were before, so in the case of a network marketer, who they were before they started that business, like who was that person? So, for me personally, I think back to who I was in 2010 before I joined my first business. I was the
Right.
stay-at-home mom with two young kids who just was ready to step out and do something that didn't involve a purple dinosaur or
Right.
a
Right.
little cartoon dog or something,
Right.
And then now to look at what I'm building, so to speak now to the legacy piece, like what I'm building with Badass Direct Sales Mastery is ultimately a coaching and training company that
Yeah.
is bigger than myself, which is why I do not call it the Jennie Bellinger, LLC, Jennie Bellinger Coaching LLC or whatever, because it's not
Jenny's
about
badass
me.
direct sales.
Right. Because
Right.
it's not about me, right? There's a part of me that it's in it, but ultimately my goal with this is to build it so big that it's not about me. It's not, it's
Yes.
about all the people that I'm helping, the coaches that I'll bring on, and they'll help people and the ripple effect that's going to go out, right?
Yeah.
So, eh, so for people who are looking at that, so now let's take them from, all right, they've looked at who they were when they started, before they
Yeah.
started, looking at their legacy. Now, how do we take that and turn that into a brand? Like,
Well, it's first of all, I wanted to say also that's why I have Yes Brand, because my legacy will be much more about the kind of positronics of selling the truth, the book. The Yes Brand is like the yes and rule of improv, where you build on crazy suggestions and funny suggestions so that you never say no to a fun idea, and those are the legacy things. But in answer to your question about how do they bridge that gap, I think it is those things we're talking about: books, podcasts, speaking, because those dynamic things
yeah,
are where the meat is, you
yeah,
know, like your signature talk. And you start with something local where and there are a lot of great speaking coaches out there and all of that, but you
yeah,
have to know where you want to go. You can't just do what people tell you to do. And
right,
the coaches themselves, the more input they get, the more ideas and innovations they can come up with for you. So
right.
the idea is, start local, do speeches. If you're worried about the corporate entity being concerned, then start really, really personal, speaking to your kid's school, let's say, or speaking at a local chapter of something, or your, house of worship, or whatever it might be, but about your personal kind of, life and business. That's why my book covers life and business. Because in my
Mhm.
book, I talk about, how do we build a relationship with the truth in a world that's so almost polarized, to where the truth is not empirical, right?
Oh,
You know?
yes.
So the way we do it is by starting with very simple truths that are self-evident, so that you're really starting with some very simple kind of homespun beliefs that you just have. And I think when you start to do that and you show your value, you go do a lot of go on nonprofit podcasts, go on things that are about service and about helping one another and about unifying our beliefs. Don't do the thing, in my view, don't do the thing that uh that is about, oh, let's just shock people, let's just polarize people and take the real extreme view for your audience. I'm talking
Yeah.
about, you
Right.
know, that's not what it's about. It's about value anyway. It's about value, relationship building, honesty, ethics. All of that stuff is all part of living in a community and contributing to community and kids and
Yeah.
family. So use that as a place to build your credibility, because your company that you want to have support your independent brand that you want to build will appreciate that, because that adds to their brand. And
Yes.
always think of it as the win-win, same as we do with clients. We want win-wins. We
Yeah.
want our client to win. In order for me to win, my client has to win. So
Right.
the more clients, the more wins that my clients have, the more wins I have by association,
Yeah.
because I help them do that.
Right. Oh my gosh. So, as you're saying that, what came up for me is one of my previous guests that I had on the show. His name is Jordan Adler. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's one of the most successful network marketers
Yeah.
that's in existence right now. He's made in the nine figures,
Wow.
or sorry, eight figures. Sorry, I got to remath
That's
that
all
in my
right.
head. Eight figures, but
Eight
still,
figures is also okay.
I know eight figures is fantastic, right? And part of the way he did that was he did brand himself differently, but still within the guidelines of the company that he's
Yeah.
associated with, right?
Yeah.
And and that's why it's been so part of why he's been so successful, is because then he was able to attract in more people because of that brand, that then people will, so what are you selling? What are you doing? And then he was able to then bring in more people on his team who did, who added to his success because of what he's
Yeah.
doing. And I think that's just a really great example for people to be able to attach to, for someone who's
Yeah.
in our industry, who's done exactly what you talked about right there. So let's dig more into your book then. So it's Selling
Yeah.
the Truth, and it's called a Semoir,
Yes.
Semoir, a Semoir. What's a
Yeah.
Semoir?
A semoir is obviously a
Obviously,
semi-memoir.
right?
Well, I came up with that term. I hope it catches on, because it's, you know, if I were a world famous person, if that had been the path that I'd chosen, then it would be a memoir.
Right.
But the fact is, a semoir is a semi-memoir, because it only has anecdotes and life stories that apply to the lessons I'm trying to teach about business. So
Ah,
I didn't want to do my sister, who is as funny as my sisters are, as funny as I am, if not funnier, but they don't have that. They would never get on stage, either one of them, if they can avoid it.
right.
If they were in a club, which they have been, if they were in a club when I was performing stand up, they would be horrified, mortified if I singled them out. Oh, my sisters are here. So anyway, so one of my sisters asked me, "Are we in the book? Like, are we in the new book?" And I said, "No. The next book is about family trauma." but I said, no, because honestly, when it comes to business lessons, that's not the part of my life that really resonates. It's
Right.
really, what did I learn from comedy? What did I learn from advertising? What did I learn from, uh, you know, but I have a chapter that it has lessons I learned from my dad. But I think in general, it's a lot about what did I learn in life that helps me in business, you
Yeah.
know? And so I didn't want to bore, quote unquote, bore people with my whole life story, but I do draw on things that I went through, things that I learned, owning businesses and starting businesses and promoting them, and the corporate world that I kind of almost systemically avoided because of some of the things we talked about. I didn't
Yeah.
want anybody to tell me what to do. So it was fine
Yeah.
if my clients were corporations, or if my clients were corporations, it was fine. But I always had the option of saying, you know what? It ultimately is my brand, my company, and I'm going to do what I feel is right.
Well, and I think I know many of many of the people in the audience right now, the badass crew, are listening, going, "Oh yeah, I know that, right?" They're
Yeah,
associated with a network marketing brand because they don't want to deal with, you know, putting together the development of a product,
yeah,
manufacturing the product, distributing the product. They're perfectly happy selling and representing a product and a company that resolves an issue and just getting paid for that, right? But
yeah,
they still aren't being told what to do. It's their own
yeah.
independent business, right? So I think that's a great piece. And how do you see the book Selling the Truth working, being something that can add to a network marketer?
Well, I think there are a lot of chapters in the book. It's fine. I have the book back there, and I don't
Hey.
often pull it out. But I'll tell you some of the chapters, what some of the chapters are called, and you tell me. Like, for example, one of chapter 2 is before you brand yourself, know yourself. And I think
Oh,
that that's a big thing that, network marketers don't often get to think of it, because they are thinking about that product. They
yeah.
often don't get to think about that individual spark that really sets them apart as marketers, because they're focused on the product and what the audience for the product is going to want, this product, that product. But there has to be a consistency in your style, in your voice, right?
Yeah.
um you know then I have third party validation and why you should listen to Hersh, right? um
Oh,
because
yes.
third party validation is like half the battle. I mean, you're validating stuff that you believe in, and how much more valuable is that than the brand say, or the product saying, hey, use us, we do this and we do that.
Yeah.
So to a great extent, you're in the business of validating others, and
Yeah.
you're in the business of validating those products. And how valuable is that? And how important is that? I use the analogy of the Lone Ranger is the hero, right? But
Yeah.
Tonto's the one who would ride into town before the Lone Ranger got there and make sure that everybody knows who's coming. And it's like that kind of groundwork, and laying the groundwork is super, super important. Um, I also have a chapter called Comedy and Messaging. you know how
Yes.
far is too soon, which doesn't make sense in the common vernacular. But in comedy, when you make a joke that is a little bit close to the bone and maybe ruffles some feathers, people shout too soon, too soon.
Yeah.
It always takes time. So the question is, how far can you take your audience with humor? How far can you push it? And that's something
Mm.
that as we've been talking about, your people are always struggling with, is where's the line? You
Yeah.
know, where's the line between me and the people I'm representing, my voice and their voice. And so there's a lot of stuff in there about, you know, finding your voice, where it fits, how not to offend. It all goes back to that turning the temperature down thing that I learned as a child, or I realized I had a gift for as the child, because being the one to regulate the emotions among the people you're dealing with and making sure everybody's good, there's a lot of that in there too.
Mm. Oh my gosh, I love that. And especially the comedy piece, right? Because my show is Badass Direct Sales Mastery,
Yes.
right? The acronym is BDSM.
Yes.
Therein lies the joke, right? Like,
Yes.
I'm not actually whipping anybody.
Right.
We're whipping businesses, right? It's the humor piece. And that's
Yes.
when I was developing the podcast, because the podcast started first and then it evolved into also being the name of my coaching business, because my coaching business used to be called something else. And the evolution came about because so many people like got the joke, right? And
Yeah.
that's really what this whole thing was about, was how do you that's how I chose to brand myself in this way, to stand out and be different on purpose from other podcasts in the same niche,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But tongue in cheek, little bit of sass, lots of laughing
Yes.
is the point, you know?
But
So,
Jenny, the thing where that's so important is that the the networks, the corporate people, the brands, they don't always have the luxury of being badasses,
mhm,
but they want a badass on their side
yeah,
and they want a badass in their corner. They love, like when I was working with footwear brands and all that stuff, and they couldn't do a lot of the things that I could get away with. And the same was true in the production world where, I would tell my clients sometimes, that phrase, you know, apologize later, you know,
oh yeah,
act now and apologize later. But I would say, you know what? You can always blame me. You can always get the hit, get the exposure, get the kudos for being brave or whatever, and then say, listen, my publicist is an idiot. He doesn't know what he was doing. He's just we're gonna fire him, but we're so sorry. Now that rarely happened,
yeah,
because as a business model,
yeah,
that's not great. But
yeah.
in
You
the
don't want to be
moment,
hearing about all the people who had
yeah,
to fire
no,
Hersh.
no, no, no. And I mean, if you
No,
look historically at me, you really would never, you rarely see
right,
like stepping over the line. This guy steps over the line, but the badassery,
yeah.
like a little bit of badass. There was a name for an ad agency that no one ever got to use, but I loved it. Was Brass Balloons. I just thought I just thought there was something about that name. It's not offensive,
No,
right? There's
no,
nothing about that, but there's so much you could do with it. But that's like that little bit of my company in PR was called Raging Artists. It had an edge, you know.
yeah,
It was like it wasn't really angry. The tagline was beloved,
right,
be feared, be known. And I felt like that was just the right amount of balls,
yeah,
just the right amount of gumption and chutzpah that you needed to have, right?
yeah,
And so I think that by osmosis, by being around it, a lot of bigger brands, bigger products really like that. They can't always do it, but they want a little bit.
yeah. No, and I think that's the fun piece that comes in, because we don't always get to be creative, but sometimes doing this kind of that part of the personal branding work, that's where the fun gets, where we get to be creative and
Yeah.
do those kinds of things, and being able to play with that type of um some of the comedy, the fun, the edginess,
Yeah.
the sassiness, like walking that line, because when I look back at when I was with my network market or direct sales company that I was with, I always did kind of walk that line
Hmm.
of you know corporate, what's okay, what's compliant, and what's
Yeah.
Jenny, and having fun with
Well,
that. And it was
yeah.
badassery. And that's really where the brand
Yeah.
came from, because when my when my podcast host was asking me, well, who were you when you were the direct salesperson? I was like, I was a badass. Like, hello, I've got the
Yeah.
trophies to prove it, and
Yeah.
and so that's really where all that came from. So, man, personal branding is so huge, though, and we can't talk forever about it. But what we can do is you have this awesome brand building quiz
Yes.
that the badass crew, if they want to go like begin taking the steps towards developing their personal brand, um, can do that. So tell us a little bit about the personal branding quiz.
So I realize that a lot of people don't know there is no, like, there's a FICO score, but there's no score for how your personal brand is
Mm.
doing. Now, there are for corporate brands, there's obviously, metrics for that. But I thought, well, I need to, like we've been talking about, I need to combine the personal and the intimate with the fun and the external.
Yeah.
And I realize there are, if we look at what we've done historically long enough, we'll start to see the pattern and see
Mm.
where we've succeeded and where we failed. And I realized that there were three areas that people needed to focus on. Thought leadership obviously is a huge one. The mission, which is, how are you doing in executing on your thought leadership and exploiting it
Mm.
and taking advantage of all those things that make you special. And then probably first and foremost, how much clarity do you have around those two things and around your own brand? Like I said, before you know yourself, before you brand yourself, know yourself. So I break the quiz down into those three areas. And it's
Mm.
short. It takes literally 60 seconds to do the quiz and
Oh.
get the results. But by checking out your score, you'll see what are you doing right? What are you not quite doing right?
Hmm?
And a few things in each category that you can do based on, where you land, that
Yeah.
you can do to really move things forward. Um, and so I think it's a great thing to do. Obviously, when I'm either courting clients or working with clients, I have them do it, and I often have people do the quiz. It's like something you can do any day,
Yeah.
because let's say you change something, you're trying to see if stuff is working, and you answer the same questions you answered last week, but now, you know things are
Yeah.
different.
You have a new
It will
mindset.
change your
Yeah.
quotient. It'll change how things are appearing for you. And that's my favorite thing, is to stimulate progress,
Mhm.
stimulate thought and action, right?
Yeah.
And so much of my quiz is predicated on that questions of, yeah, but how much action? That's what the mission thing is all about. Yeah, but how much are you acting on? If you've acted
Oh.
on it, you've done A, B, and C. If you
Yeah.
haven't, then
Yeah.
that score is going to be low, and
Oh my
that will
gosh.
affect your overall personal brand score.
Oh,
So,
I love that.
yes.
Okay, so of course, my badass crew, they already know that the link to take the quiz is in the show notes. Now, just in case we've got somebody here and it's their very first time ever listening, the link to the quiz is in the show notes. So, how do you find the show notes? You grab your phone, as long as you're not driving, click on today's episode, scroll under Hersh's picture, and there you will find the link to the personal brand building quiz. So, you don't have to worry about spelling it right or anything. Just click on that link, go take the quiz. It takes 60 seconds. In fact, I'm probably going to go do it right now because
Yeah.
I want to see how I measure up. I love analytics and knowing those things. So, Hersh, this has been awesome, fun, and hilarious. I mean, thank you for sharing your brilliance with us.
My pleasure, Jenny. That's all I've ever wanted to be. Thank you, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to first of all spend time with you, and second do all this chatting about personal branding.
I love it. And of course, Badass Crew, if you want to find out more, go check out the show notes. We have all of Hersh's social media links and places where you can check him out and learn more about the brands that he has worked with. Because trust me, I did my research before I got on with him, and I was quite impressed with some of who he's worked with. So go check him out. Follow him if you want to learn more about your own personal brand and how you can really rock that out and build your business this year. So Hersh, again, thank you. Have a wonderful day. And Badass crew, you know how this goes. Stay tuned because there's another badass episode on its way.
Thanks for listening to the Badass Direct Sales Mastery Podcast with your direct sales dom, Jennie Bellinger. Why are you waiting to go to badassdirectsalesmastery.com? Don't make the dom get her whip. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with another rock star that you know in direct sales after you subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. You can also check out the show notes for links and any contact information mentioned in today's episode. We'll see you next time.